Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Maryfran Johnson, CEO of Maryfran Johnson Media. Twice a month, we produce CIO Leadership Live with the generous support of my friends at CIO.com and the CIO Executive Council. We're streaming live to you right now on LinkedIn and on YouTube on our very own CIO channel there. We welcome all of our viewers today who are listening in to my conversation to pop up with questions of your own. We have an editor who's watching the feed on both LinkedIn and YouTube and will be happy to pass along your questions to today's guest, which I'm very happy to introduce and welcome to our show, Cisco Sanchez. He is the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Qualcomm. Founded in 1985 and headquartered in San Diego, where it is the largest employer in the city, Qualcomm is a global semiconductor and telecom company that designs and markets wireless communication products and services. With 45,000 employees around the world and revenue last year topping $44 billion, this tech giant is one of the world leaders in wireless technology innovations. It's also a driving force behind the development and launch and expansion of 5G, the fifth generation mobile network. Cisco took on the CIO role at Qualcomm in November of 2021 after a 25-year career in various technology leadership roles at FedEx. Most recently, he served as Senior Vice President of IT Systems and CIO at FedEx Ground. And before that, he was Managing Director for FedEx Services in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Cisco got his start in IT at FedEx as a technical architect for FedEx Services. And he still talks about himself as a developer architect by nature, which he tells me means that he sees opportunity everywhere. So, Cisco, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Maryfran. It's an honor to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much. Let's start with that. Let's pivot off that opportunity hook there. Sure. What was the opportunity at Qualcomm that drew you away from what was obviously a thriving career at FedEx to become only the third CIO in Qualcomm's 38-year history?
It's a really great question. And so, for my friends at FedEx, still love the company. It's a great team. The leadership over there is fabulous. And so it was never running away from anything. No. It was more running towards opportunity on what is Qualcomm trying to reinvent and create. And so part of it was the new leadership structure coming into fold. There was a new CEO, a new CFO, a new CHRO, a new CMO kind of rolling into their role, a new general counsel, and they're looking for a new CIO. And some of them have been there for a long time, but they're new in their roles. And so that was exciting, of being able to pivot into an organization and start to make a change and redevelop what Qualcomm should be becoming. Yes. And so as you probably know, as you stated, Qualcomm is the inventor of the 5G technology. So we think of that as the phone, the mobile handset. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is when you pivot off of the mobile phone and saying, what else can you create with connectivity, there's sky's the limit. And so if we want to be the company that creates the connected edge, the intelligent connected edge, there's cars and IoT and smart tags and there's so much more. And so that was the draw of it's not just a handset company, but more of a intelligent connected edge company. And so that was the draw. And then, of course, you can't beat the weather in San Diego. So that was sorry for those on the East Coast right now.
Well, yeah, but you probably do enough traveling since Qualcomm is so global. I don't know how much time you get to enjoy the great weather in San Diego.
Well, that is true.
Now, I remember talking to a couple of your CIO comrades over the years, and when I would ask them, what is the single biggest change coming to technology that really will change everything? And like the CIO of the Jet Propulsion Labs said immediately 5G, and the kind of changes that are coming with 5G are going to be, they're a little bit hard to imagine, although I imagine at Qualcomm you spend a good amount of your time thinking about that. So talk about that piece of it, the 5G expansion. I know just recently the company announced getting into the whole auto space, for instance.
Yes, yeah, it's a great question. So when we look at 5G and what it can enable, and so if we go back in time just a little bit and saying, do you remember those flip phones we used to have? And you could make a good call, and you had certain amount of text messages that could be done. And primarily it was because of the technology. Technology can only limit the amount of interaction and traffic that can go through the network. Then it opened up a little bit more. You had a smartphone that first got created. You can do more texting and maybe some video content, but it's really very limited. Maybe some games. And then the technology advanced a little bit further, and now we have 4G now into 5G, where you can do having the ability to talk via video or play games or interact with your favorite social media, like CIO or LinkedIn or YouTube, and have the ability to do that interaction. And then 5G is now here. And what 5G gives us is better bandwidth, more opportunity, so you can actually start to leverage technology really on the edge. And that's where you get to more useful use cases versus just having video. What else can you do by just moving data around? Yeah. And so if you take that analogy of 5G being able to leverage the data and you apply it to auto or IoT, you can pick one of the two because we're in both. Right. In the auto space, we know that a car is really now becoming more of a computer on wheels. The computer on wheels needs to send data, receive data, almost real time to capture content and information so it can make different choices, update maps, identify what the streets look like, understand the parameters of the car, being able to make it have the ability for self-driving in the future. So it needs real back and forth information. Some that will be stored inside the vehicle, but some that need to go off box and off car and be able to translate and bring it back. So I think that's where the technology starts to get interesting. And 5G now has enabled that. And then the advancement of 5G into the next round of future 6G will give us more and more content. But think of it as bandwidth going back and forth as that pipe continues to get bigger. Yes. And so I think that is interesting. And if you apply that also to IoT, where everything is connected and you could look around your house, you have smart light bulbs that are IoT-ish or plugs that are IoT-ish, or your wash and dryer are IoT-ish. And so it doesn't have to be a small little tag. It can be lots of things that are IoT connected. And they also need the ability for bandwidth to go back and forth. Well,
Qualcomm, I think probably when you bring up the name of the company to a lot of people in the tech industry, it immediately translates into hardware, like semiconductors and chips and that sort of thing. Is that expansion into areas where it needs to be as much thought of as a software company as a hardware company?
Absolutely.
Was that what attracted you also? And what did you bring to that party from your work at FedEx?
Yes. So as you said in the intro, I'm really an architect developer by nature. I see opportunity. And so the part of the draw is I'm a developer by nature. Sincerely, I love to see things get created. It makes me happy. And so watching something get born and come alive and take on a new nature is super interesting. And so if you look at Qualcomm, we're traditionally more of a hardware company. Now we're working up the stack to become hardware and a software company that enables other technologies or other tool sets. And so that's been a lot of the draw. And taking my experience from FedEx, we built a lot of things, primarily because it wasn't available. Of course, we used third-party applications, SaaS providers, but a lot of it is how do you create a hub? People don't do that. And so you build your own technology, knowing that it has to be reliable 24/7 because it's always running. It has to have changing parts, and it's a foundational piece because it's probably going to be there for 20 years. So architecture really matters. Can't just code and load. You have to think about what you want to build for the long term. And the same thing applies here. If we're going to be building capabilities that go into vehicles and or IoT devices, architecture matters and how you build matters. And so part of the draw from into Qualcomm was being identified of how we can make an impact into that space. And how can we take some of the software tool sets that we've been building at the former company and apply them to Qualcomm and allow for new things to be to come alive.
All right. Well, and you were a CIO at FedEx Ground. And so you're familiar with all the different parameters of the CIO job, all of the table stakes that you have to deliver on. Talk about kind of your marching orders coming in, what the breath of fresh air you were going to bring from both FedEx experience and what needed to change in the tech organization itself. And it kind of give us an idea of what your role includes now.
Yeah, it's a great question. So as you stated, when I was at FedEx Ground, I was the CIO over there. So similar scale of applications, people, and when coming over here, my marching orders were, how do we look at the problem differently? And I was joking with a customer, with my team, saying when we look at the number of customers we interact with, it's a smaller number. Yes. And if we go into IoT, and primarily it was the handset. So when you look at the handset, there's only so many people that make the phones, and so you can do the numbers. It's pretty small. Yeah. But when you go into auto or IoT, the scale is different, and so the interaction has to be different. And so what we did before doesn't scale to where we have to be in the future. And so a lot of it is, how do we do case deflection? How do we identify the abilities for us to not have to white glove all activity, but to build more common foundational services that allow for every business unit to take advantage of it, not just one. And so we think of creating capabilities for marketing and sales, being able to create monetization modules to allow them to plug in, allowing for cloud compute to be done more efficiently. And we pick all three of them so we can leverage all of them. We identify how do you make the developers more productive. And so thinking about pipelines, and we think about repositories, and how do you have common APIs. And so it's a lot of them, the manifesto, the IT manifesto that we've been creating is to drive out, how do you get efficiencies, how do you get scale, and then how do you accelerate and create almost accelerators for all different groups so they can actually go faster into the development. And a lot of it is we are an invention company, R&D, that creates cool capabilities, and we have to be first. And the only way to be first is by creating enablers that allow the developers and the teams to be super efficient and go at scale and speed. You also have to have base layers to allow them to run at the right pace. And so that was the mindset coming in. Yeah. The marching orders was, take a lot of that thought process, ensure that we do base business, because if you don't do base business, you can't innovate. And so it's run the business, secure the business. So think of cyber. I have the cyber team within my organization, and that's a fun one. That's probably a whole nother topic, cyber. And then all of the development for sales, marketing, HR, finance, legal, how to optimize our pre-silicon environment, and then how do we support the BUs like auto and IoT in a different fashion that we haven't done in the past.
Well, and that does sound similar and familiar to what a lot of CIOs at large organizations have to deal with. You've been there now almost a year and a half. Did you do any kind of reorging or restructuring? Did you create new groups that hadn't existed before? I may be alone in being fascinated about the internal structure of IT organizations, but I kind of can't help myself.
So when I first came in, my goal was never to jerk the wheel. And I know that kind of it's a different analogy, but I didn't want to come in and saying my predecessor did it wrong and I got to do this. And so my goal
Oh,
was for the first couple of months, learn,
yeah.
don't judge, absorb, understand the cultures, understand the decisions that were made and not made. And they're all for relative reasons. I
Hmm.
wasn't in the circumstance. I don't know what happened, but I can learn a lot. And so for the first 2 months, it was a lot of learning, just absorb,
Hmm.
understand, identify what the strategies are and how do we get them there. The last months have been working with the team on creating a framework to say, and what do we want to do different, right? And
Right.
so a lot of it has been focused on what is current state. And if we are at as you just mentioned, the $44 billion company, and
Mhm.
we want to grow to double that as a beachhead, what does it take to do? And so we looked
Right.
at the current state, this organization. How does the tech model look like?
Hmm.
What does the organizational model look like? What are the enablement activities? And we created a model. And it's not me that's creating it; it's the team that's helping to create it.
Hmm.
We then looked at the future state. So what does the future state look like? And
Yeah.
identifying where do we want to become? And so, but you need a marker of where am I starting from? Otherwise, you
Right.
don't know how you get there. And then we've been focusing in on, okay, if we want to, if current state looks like this, future state looks like that, here is the gap that we have to go do.
Hmm.
And we've been focusing in on the gap, saying, and here's how we're going to get there. Real methodical, identifying, here's the strategy of, here's what the future organization should look like. Here's the capabilities that we want to create. Here's the development model that's required. And we
Hmm.
broke it into three main phases: a business track, a technical track, and an enablement track. And I say all this because this is kind of where we're heading, and
Right.
it's super exciting because it's change, it's different,
Yeah.
and which does require the organization to kind of now to be aligned, but it can't be just aligned to IT. It also has to mirror what the business is doing.
Hmm.
So we're trying to mirror how auto is being structured and IoT is being structured. So we're better IT business partners
Hmm.
because I think the chief information role is really the chief integration role.
Yes.
And so it is really, I know we see CIO as information, but for me, it's always been about integration because we have to figure out how to integrate a lot of these capabilities. And so the organization was put in place really well. We're just augmenting it to say, how do we support the IoT? And then what are
Hmm.
the key foundational services that we have to create for the future that everybody can leverage?
Well,
Um,
and you had mentioned too that when you first joined in late 2021, Qualcomm was a $33 billion company. And here we are, high
a year
speed, a year
later.
and a
Yeah.
half later, and it's
Yeah.
44 billion. So
Yeah.
that it's unusual to see that kind of it's hyper growth, right? And it's
Yeah.
unusual
It's
to see
exciting.
that in a great big old establishment company. I say old, like 38 is old. I guess
Yeah.
in the tech industry it is. I couldn't help but think that you also have a lot of legacy, or what do the Brits call it, heritage technologies to deal with. Is
Yeah.
tech modernization a big part of what you're doing, or do you get to essentially pull off and play and build in other areas that don't require that great big rationalization?
So we are a tech company by nature, and as you
Mhm.
said, and a lot of the tech company, they've been doing a lot of ensuring that there's a good modernization
Mhm.
because you have to because you're creating the next amazing either 5G or Bluetooth or Wi-Fi chip that enables companies to kind of flourish and thrive.
Mhm.
So there's I did not inherit a ton of legacy, which is
Oh,
awesome. And so
that's
most
pretty awesome.
CIOs coming into a 37-year-old company, or almost 38,
Mhm.
you have legacy to deal with. There's not that much. There are some. There are pieces and
Oh,
parts. So
yeah.
it's not, but there are, and it's primarily because of the tech mindset of we have to continue to have the latest and greatest technology to allow for our chips to be created. And so there's spots. And so a
Mhm.
lot of my charter is to ensure that not only are we secure, but where we have opportunity,
Right.
of course we're going to deprecate and lean on some new technologies, but
Mhm.
it wasn't overwhelming, and
Mhm.
I know that if you've been longer than in 10 years in the business
Mhm.
with the company, you have legacy. So we do have some. It's just my past peers have done an amazing job of making sure that they get rid as much as they could.
Mhm. And I know too, we had talked about this when you arrived, you didn't have to create any kind of a digital roadmap. You were the newest addition to all of the road warriors that were working that roadmap. Tell us a little bit about that, about how that was created and what the technology organizations other roles in it. I mean, obviously there's the running the technology and providing it and that sort of thing, but I'll bet there are other things that you're doing as part of that digital roadmap.
So the digital roadmap, our CMO, his name's Don McGuire, amazing man. Him and I have been partnering up on creating that digital roadmap, digital transformation roadmap,
Yes.
at least for the customer presence. And so it's the CMO and the CSO, Jim Cathy, myself, and Don McGuire, looking at how do we want to reinvent the interaction with Qualcomm. And so when you go into our site and poke around and look at things, we need to drive different capabilities to allow for us not just to be a website, but more of an interactive. And so that's actually underway right now. When I first came on, that was one of the first things we started of saying, how do we want to reinvent this to make it more developer aware, to ensure that we drive attention, identify better sales leads, ensure that we market differently. And particularly when you go in from one business space of a handset and growing into the others, you have to market differently. You have to drive attention differently. You have to interact differently. And so a lot of that has been our main focus. Of course, working with the teams and identifying where is the potential. We've did some great partnerships with some third-party SaaS providers to help us with some tooling, some new capabilities that we're implementing now. And it's all coming in. What we're doing is a very agile approach. We're taking advantage of something called SAFe. It's a scaled agile framework. It's a safe. It's an agile methodology that allows us to deliver in small chunks, but we're delivering value at a faster pace. So you're seeing increments of 2 weeks of capabilities coming, and so it's really quite fun and interesting that some of the stuff has happened and will be coming very, very shortly.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've always admired about all the different approaches to Agile, not just as the technologies involved or even the methodologies, but also the bigger cultural impact it has on the company in the way that technology teams and business teams are now actually everybody's
coming together.
Yeah, and everybody's got a stake in the game. What did you bring about any kind of changes in that as you've been doing your work over the last year and a half? Was that something that were the Agile teams already up and full speed ahead?
It's a combination. So there's just for the larger audience, sorry to go back a step, but there's two main types of way you develop. There's obviously a waterfall, which traditional, it's been around for a long time. You write requirements, you kind of flip them over the wall, and then a year later, I know I'm dramatizing and exaggerating, but a year later, delivery happens, and it's mostly right. But in a year, the requirements have changed because the business has changed, and it's not. I know I'm dramatizing a little bit. The second methodology is an agile methodology, which smaller requirements, they're done in little quick sprints, and they get back to the business and new value. But if you've seen an agile team, you've seen an agile team. They're always done a little bit different. The interaction's a little bit different.
Right.
And so the reason why we've chosen SAFe, and it's just a methodology. It's a framework that helps us hone in on how do you create common across all of the IT organization. And so when you see a SAFe team, that's how it's done across all of the SAFe teams.
Nice.
So, but as you stated, it's also a change, organizational change that happens because its interaction is different. When you're in an agile or SAFe sprint, you're creating requirements with the business, with the interaction, and they become the product owner of that deliverable. There's transparency about the capabilities that are being created. You see how fast or slow the group is. You can make changes quickly, but the idea is hopefully you deliver every day, but at a minimum start to deliver every 2 weeks of capabilities. And so you could see these And if they're wrong, you have 2 weeks of work that needs to be adjusted, but
Right.
you get fast interaction time. But what I love more than anything is, as you said, the business and IT start to form as one unit, and they become where you don't know who is business and who is IT,
That is the
because
ideal, isn't it? Yeah.
that's the greatest
Mhm.
moment ever, is when you see the business talking on behalf of IT and vice versa,
Mhm.
and they know what they're saying and how they're saying it, and it's magical.
I
Simply magical.
I think Agile has given IT and business folks on in all parts of the company a new common language to understand each other. I hear less about, you remember the days of the kind of business translation roles that we had to
Yeah,
create in IT.
yeah,
So there could be somebody that would go over to the marketing department and try to explain in terms everybody could understand what was going on.
yes.
And now, once you have a common language, it's almost like that has really just shifted the whole conversation to a different level.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's also, you get happier team members because they get to see
Mm-hmm.
the capabilities get delivered faster, not waiting. You get to see the business and IT alignment be better.
Yeah.
So it's this tighter collaboration. You get speed, transparency.
Mm-hmm.
It never goes from green to red. You can see it turns from green to yellow to red because you get
Yeah.
full visibility of everything. And you can make better conscious decisions of,
Mm-hmm.
we need to pivot because the business is reacting differently,
Yes.
or a new model has formed. So it allows for us to adjust very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
As you can tell, I'm kind of a fan of it.
Well, you have a developer architect mindset.
Yeah.
If you weren't a fan of this, you'd have to have some other alternate methodology and whole new way
Yeah.
approach that you'd be talking about, right? Because you'd be a
Yeah.
little out of step probably with all of the best developers and architects out there.
Yeah.
Qualcomm does not sell directly to CIOs. So CIOs are not your
Hmm.
outreach customers, but the company and you especially are very engaged with the technology challenges that all of your fellow CIOs in different industries are going through.
Most
Talk
definitely.
about your CIO Forum group inside of Qualcomm and what you're hearing from these different industries about the kind of challenges that your peers are dealing with these days.
So the CIO forum that we've created was partly because every CIO should have CIO friends. We
Oh,
have same problems. We have same
couldn't agree
issues.
more. Yeah.
Yeah, we have same problems. We have same
Yep.
issues.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we just want to vent, but we need
I
friends.
know.
We need them for lots of reasons. Either when a cyber incident occurs, how to
Mm-hmm.
balance and understand, and talk to people, even if it needs to be private.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding scale size, understanding different SaaS providers, cloud compute, hyperscalers that are out there, tool sets are coming into, and so the forum was created to help interaction of establishing friendship, but also how do we solve problems together
Mm-hmm.
and create the next greatest thing. And we think, the Qualcomm, we think there's a lot of cool capabilities that are out there that are enablers for businesses. And so our CIO forum that we've been creating, and we've done a couple of times, is we pull in people from the transportation network, transportation industry, some from shipping, some from fintech, some from
Mm-hmm.
true tech companies. And so there are a lot of different areas that we're kind of focusing in on.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is to share capability ideas. So if you're in the transportation industry, let's say trains for fun, um, trains are becoming more of a smart train on wheels
I
because
was
they
going to
need
say
tech.
they're huge consumers of IoT devices. I think the first interviews
Yeah.
I remember doing about Internet of Things had to do with sensors being placed on railroad tracks and that sort of
Yeah, so it's railroad tracks. It's on the cars. It's in their yards. And if
thing.
you ever seen a train yard, they're massive, and
Mm-hmm.
they have to offload quickly. And or if you take another industry like technology, they're trying to figure out how to have enablement activities around their campuses. And so it draws discussions about what could be the possibilities. And for me, it's always been about how do we collaborate and align and build something together. It's not, just buy it from Qualcomm. It's how can we partner and build something different that's not been born yet and create a new capability that helps solve a problem that enables their business to thrive better. And so like the train one is a good example, but there's lots of others that are similar to that of, a smarter copy machine, the way you do interactions for fintech. And so I think within the technology scope, we're trying to make sure that we identify what could be available, what could help drive change, and what could help change their business. And then we get friends. It's been a whole fun event. It really has been.
I've always, whenever I ask CIOs about the top issues that they're dealing with, and this goes back for probably more years than I want to admit to at this point, they always have talent in the top three. And over the years, you've seen all those same stories, the crisis, the war for talent, everything. The language never changes very much around them. But when you fast forward to today, what are the talent challenges that you are dealing with? And are any of them new? It seems like it's a lot of the same stuff about, well, we need the latest skills and we need developers who do this, that, and the other thing. So what is the talent landscape like for you? And are there new challenges you're trying to solve that you haven't encountered before?
Talent is always will be on the top 10. And probably cyber, but those are always on the top 10. And talent always is our most precious resource. It really is. And so the talent really has to be of how do you ensure that you're building the right talent for the culture values that you want to create. So of course it's talent to create a task, table stakes, so they have to be skilled, but it's also the culture. For me, culture matters of how people interact, how they do work. And so we're conscientious of that. We know that the talent also, we're growing new skill sets that may not exist yet, and some capabilities. And so how do we want to retool our team members to allow them not only to leverage, the Agile as we were talking about earlier, but to leverage SAFe and how to retool them, or new tool sets we're creating, or new AI models that we have to build out. And so it's not just looking at the resource, but how do we ensure that we invest in them properly? And so when we started to build out the strategy, one of the items that we were focusing on is, we called it enablement, but it's looking at our current team. How do you retool, allow for new capabilities for them, grow them, soft skills and hard skills. But then when you onboard, how do you grow them, give them soft skills and hard skills? And what's interesting about this new world that we all live in is we live in a hybrid world. Yeah. And so the ability for us to have access to different talent doesn't always have to be in San Diego. As we talked about, my team is in San Diego, but they're also in a lot of different areas in the US. I have teams in Cork, I have teams in India, I have teams in Germany, I have teams in APAC. And so it gives me a little bit of a wider range of saying, I have to see you next to me by my office so I know you're productive. So I kind of like the hybrid world where we have talent. Yeah, the ability for talent more in other areas. So that's a kind of a good tailwind for us. The headwinds are always the headwinds of cost, people, but we're trying to battle with understanding that we can believe we could, and I love interns because I was an intern a long time ago. Identify interns, pull them into the organization, grow them efficiently, retool them, allow them to be as productive. We're looking at other creative ways of partnering with some of the military that's is retiring, and then how do you onboard them, retool them, get them ready? We're working with a couple of different universities, identifying if individuals weren't able to get a 4-year degree in CIS, how can you onboard them, retool them, train them, get them ready? And so we're looking at other creative ways of not just the traditional of they have to have an MIT degree and they have to be at these schools. It's broadening a bit, and it allows us to make sure that we find the right talent and grow
Yes.
them effectively. And hopefully they're here for a majority part of their career.
Mm-hmm.
Or if not, they're tool and ready for the next company that can hire that needs to hire somebody.
Well, I've had so many CIOs. I'll ask about, how do you acquire new talent? And usually they say, well, it's actually more important to retain the talent you have.
I agree.
And the fact that you do more leadership and development programs is something that is always very significant with that. And you said like 2,500 people around the world. So the churn must be fairly amazing with that.
What's interesting, and a good percent of churn is good just to kind of keep when you have too much, it's impactful to the organization.
Yeah.
So our churn is pretty good. It's about less than 5%, which is pretty good.
That is pretty good, yeah, because there were numbers getting up to 25 and 30% for a while.
Yeah, which
generated all those stories about, like the quiet quitting and all that other stuff.
Yeah. Well, and I think partly it's we're trying to hone in on, you said it, retain the people, the talent that you have. Mm-hmm. We're trying to retain them and show them the culture, the capabilities, and give them opportunity to continue to grow in their career, and hopefully out of that they'll want to stay. Of course, we pay a good salary, but it's not always about salary. For me, it's always been three things. Of course, salary is number one. It is what it is. Number two is a lot of them want to create the next best thing. So there's this, they want to do something good or create value or create new capabilities. And then the third is, and we have that, by the way, second one. And then the third one, of course, is they want to feel appreciated and thanked. I mean, more than anything. And and so we try to do all three of them. We make sure we hone in on the last two. Give them something that is game changing, that is driving change, that impacts the world, and make sure we show that we appreciate and thank them.
Yeah. Well, having that sense of purpose and appreciation, just the more empathetic leadership that has emerged out of the last few years of the pandemic has, I think, probably been one of the most significant, not really a course change, but maybe just a broadening of horizons for CIOs as people leaders as well. A couple of years ago, when you talked to CIOs, they really didn't want to talk about their relationships with the head of HR, because a lot of times HR was just the blockade door that wasn't getting them the talent they need. More and more now, I just hear CIOs sending, verbal valentines to their HR folks with how well they're helping them with all of these different aspects of talent management.
We do. Same here. Me and the CHRO, I actually talked to her yesterday. We have a very great relationship, and we collaborate well. And even in the programs that we're creating at IT, we partner directly with them to say, how do we create these new learning modules for soft skill sets? And then how do we grow the team and retool them appropriately, as we know that we're going to this new era that we're developing. And so you have to have the relationship. I think the CIO and CHRO not having a relationship could be a bad thing for an organization. So you have to establish it. It's important.
Yes. Yeah. The one of the things I have been asking about on a lot of the CIO interviews over the last few years, I started calling them innovation ecosystems, because it's fallen way out of favor to just have like a group that takes care of innovation. But there's generally something in place, especially in really thriving tech organizations, where there are ways to encourage and generate more of that. How does that happen at Qualcomm, when one of the big pillars of the company is all the R&D and the innovation that is kind of the life's blood of, the hyper growth the company's been going through and so forth? So did you, when you came in a year and a half ago, did you bring any additional tweaks to a strategy that generates a lot of innovative thinking and doing?
I love innovation, because I think but innovation doesn't have to be a think tank by itself of a group that does it. I think if you were relying on that only, we'd have problems. And so everybody has to innovate. And it's small innovation that matters, like how do you make a procedure a little bit easier to follow? That's innovation. Or how do you change the data module to allow it to be better so you can optimize your hardware? That's innovation. And so a lot of it is making sure that you create the culture and value system to allow people to want to innovate and know that some innovation doesn't work. And so we think of like if we have to fail fast and move on. And it's not there is no punishment here of saying if you fail, you're out. We have to give them enough security that we want people to innovate and change the way they think and do to allow us all to be better. And sometimes we don't do it. It sometimes doesn't work. That's fine.
Yeah.
But systemically, we're also trying to create within the framework for how we develop is every 10 weeks in a 2-week sprint, you have the ability to innovate. And that's what it's dedicated for, to either change the process, to reestablish, but it allows them almost a little bit of free time to be able to do that. At a organizational wide, every Thursday afternoon is productivity zone. And so there is the intention of that productivity zone every Thursday is that the team has the ability to don't schedule meetings and have the ability to do work, innovate, change, think differently. But a lot of the time what happens, and I know you know this, is we get on that bicycle of work and we're just constantly just pedaling away and pedaling away and pedaling away. Yep. And sometimes you don't have a time to think about stuff strategic. Right. And so we're trying to give them time back of saying, let's think strategically where we're going to go. Remember, our vision is this, and this is what we want to go do. And here's the margins we want to obtain. And how do you think about that in a different lens and make sure you have the opportunity to have time to innovate, to think differently, create strategy. So we're trying to give them pockets of opportunity across the organization, not just one group that innovates.
How do you personally do that? How do you keep your innovation engine revved up? Because you have to be essentially the leader of how great it is to innovate. Sometimes I think innovation is really just another word for changing things for the better. And it's not really invention. It's not a brand new thing that nobody ever thought of. Innovation is just those gradual changes. So how do you do that? How do you pull out and do strategic, innovative thinking on your own?
So I have amazing mentors in my life. I mean, they're amazing. And I know that that's not by myself, but I get ideas, so even like the CIO Forum, they're also mentors to me. There's that group that we've created, and some continue, they're always continuing. But I have great people in my life that have supported me. And so that it's giving us, sound bites and some things that I'm not aware of. And we call them blind spots, of the blind spots that are around me. And so that gives me an input of content of saying, I didn't know that. That's interesting. There's a problem to be solved. I'm also a very morning person. I love mornings. And in that morning, it's typically me and a cup of coffee, and I get the opportunity before activity and birds wake up to think about stuff that is important for the organization. I'm as you know, as at FedEx for so long, I was a lifer there. I'm a lifer here, and so I want to drive not just dress up the building to make it look nice. I want foundational changes to drive new efficiencies and new capabilities, because I can't just decorate. I need to create it to
new
allow
worlds
for the
to
next
conquer, that kind of thing.
So but I think part of it is I have a great support system with my mentors at family. My wife and kids are a great support system. I have time in the morning by myself, and then in pockets where I can break away and go for a run with my dog, or go do some workout, or that also gives me time to not think of the task, but my brain is constantly thinking about tasks that is helping me solve another problem. And so I'm trying to also find myself windows of where can I to help make the organization better.
Sure. Well, and you mentioned blind spots, and that immediately made me think of Charlie Feld's book, which was called IT Blind Spot, right?
Yeah. And he's one of those mentors, by the way.
He is one of your mentors. I know. I think it's pretty hard to be associated with FedEx and not have worked with Charlie at some point.
He sounds special.
Yes.
Yeah, Charlie. Yeah. Well, and I know
absolutely
you know Charlie. He's been in my life for a long time. He's a wonderful man, a great mentor, has seen everything, all problems,
Yes.
at different scales. And so he has been a great, insight to my life, and not just work, but also personal life. So he's been a good person.
Well, and I noticed I saw echoes of Charlie too when you talked about CIOs needing to be chief integration officers. I remember him talking about that probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. That was one of Charlie's things. And I've always thought it was right on the money. But a lot of what he says, is that way.
Yeah.
I often at this point in the conversation would ask you about emerging technologies that you're especially interested in watching, and that just may be a little repetitive considering what we've talked about so far with 5G and IoT and all that. So let's instead play kind of a game where we'll do a sort of a semi-lightning round. And the question is this something just a lot of hype and nonsense, or is it something really happening in the technology world? And I've got half a dozen of these. The first one we'll start with, because it's so much in the news lately, ChatGPT, and the idea of artificial intelligence, AI, being leveraged to solve and create models for things that have never done before. Is it still very much a hype, or do you see it really happening?
It's happening.
Okay.
That ChatGPT is a model, and there's others that are out there that people are leveraging. ChatGPT probably is the most famous right now,
right.
And the capabilities that it creates and what it can do, from writing a love letter to writing software code to identifying the next games that are out there, is pretty impressive. And a lot of it is using open models that are out there that have been tuned for something, and they're tapping into them and pulling them out and making it useful for us to take advantage of. Yeah. And I think it's now and will accelerate. The tricky thing about like ChatGPT is if you used it, there's tons of people wanting to use it, and sometimes it gets constrained because it's on servers, hardware, and it gets bogged down a little bit. This is not a bash on it. It's just scale of how fast it came on.
It sounds like it needs a better architect.
Well, and the funny thing is I think there's opportunity here. And when you look at the way that ChatGPT is forming, we need AI as part of all of our daily activity. And so I think of ChatGPT not just being in a cloud, you ask the request, it pulls it back, but it's also on the edge. And then into the cloud. And so how do you architect a solution that allows for things to be done in real time on your laptop or on your phone? And then when it needs to go off box to get better answers or different answers, it's super seamless, and it's using the same models and new capabilities. And so I think ChatGPT is here, and others, and more are coming. And we're going to find probably it being broken into segments of a ChatGPT Copilot has something for coding, and there's a new one for probably more designated for spaces like recipes or whatever.
Specialize.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the next formulation of this AI engines that are going to be created. And to be honest, I think we need them. I think they help us make better choices and decisions. Right.
They will find a place in the world then, won't they?
Yeah.
All right, here's another one. And all of these I drew from a couple of those end of the year articles saying, here's what's coming in technology and what CIOs will need to manage in the future, that kind of thing. Computation everywhere was another one. The concept that we're evolving beyond Internet of Things to an Internet of Materials, as these clever developers that people like you are enabling all over the world are embedding smart chips inside of cloth and bricks and wood and pretty much anything. An example would be the concrete in a building can fire off an email warning because it's detected a weakness where something may fall on someone. So is that happening, or is that still hype?
I think this is part hype. So the reason I say that is we are in IoT, so we're promoting it. But
in certain material,
in certain material, I don't know. Like the brick example, in cloth, yes, it's happening. There's cloth that is helping to identify runners' behavior, CO2, and so it's happening. It's also in shoes. I think it's going to be more pervasive in more day-to-day activity versus in just foundational pieces. Some foundational, like smoke detectors and alarms, and there'll be more IoT and gas meters, IoT, but brick, maybe a little hype. But I do think it's starting to surface the right areas of where it needs to be to allow us to be more conscientious of technology. So let's take windmills. Windmills, you need IoT up there primarily because it's really hard to get to a windmill and make any adjustments or changes.
You need something up there watching and sensing.
Yeah. And so I think we're going to find the normalization of where that tech should be and where maybe it's not really needed. It could be in it, but not really required right now.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Next one, NFTs, non-fungible transactions, that where essentially NFTs are now appearing everywhere. Artists are selling digital rights to their creations, and sports leagues would like to see them become the digital version of trading cards. So what do you think of NFTs? Is this a real new innovation, or is this kind of a Ponzi scheme? Hyper happening?
I mean, it's probably because I don't understand it well enough. I understand the concept and idea. Yeah. I don't understand the ownership model. And so I think it's a neat idea, hard to
more hype than happening.
I think it's more hype.
Okay. Next one. This is much more technical, so you probably will know a lot more about this. Quantum resistant cryptography, which was described as a pie in the sky idea still, without a lot of practical demonstrations. But what if magical quantum computing machines really did start rolling off assembly lines? There will then be a search for a whole new generation of protocols that will be able to resist the power of quantum hardware. And NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Tech, has got a multi-year contest going on to choose the best algorithms. So is this still very hype-ish, or is this happening?
I think it's partly happening. And if we take the first one of the AI,
you're hedging a lot of your bets here, Cisco.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I should be more definitive on. Yeah, and the reason I think it needs to happen, and partly, Moore's law is changing a little bit now, and so you need the ability to have quantum scale in computing. But I think if you take that and add into the AI engine reference that we were talking about in the first one, you need these computers to do different stuff, because the models that we're working on, and the billions of interaction of content that you need to gather, you need a higher powered machine that's there. So I think what's interesting, I think these external AI are going to drive more of the compute, because you have to do it. And so I think that you're going to see a surge of making sure that problem gets solved.
All right. Next one on my list, the Metaverse. Yeah, that was inevitable. It would be on the list.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
Transformative potential of the Metaverse. It's this big amalgam. It's all the alphabet. It's AR for augmented reality. It's avatars, blockchain, cryptocurrency, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? I mean, is that very hype-ish now, or do you see it happening?
It's happening, and we're participating too, by the way. So, for disclosure, Qualcomm is participating in a lot of the VR XR. We are partnering with Meta, so it is happening. I think there are some really good practical use cases for VR XR of training and doing presentations and showing people how to do stuff. So super interesting. Even with the augmented reality, the AR, of demonstrating what things look like on you happening. The Metaverse on creating a look-alike universe of who you are in clothing.
The multiverse avatar stuff.
Yeah, it's happening. I super honest, I don't know if I'll live there. My kids probably will, but I don't. It's just I don't know if I can do that full step. But it's happening. I think what's interesting is seeing the gravitation of advertisers already wanting to play in that space, and so they wanting to brand it and logo it, and so it's happening, and I think it's probably for different generations of use cases that they want to take advantage of.
Right.
My kids have been born with a phone in their hands since I think they were
Yes.
little. So I
Yeah.
think they'll gravitate towards it versus, me, probably not as much. But I think there are logical places that are super interesting for productivity and change.
Well, if you ever want to freak your kids out, have you ever shown them a rotary dial phone? We
Yeah.
we found one of those in the basement, and this had to be back in the late 90s.
Like,
And
what's
we
that?
showed it to our kids who were at
Yeah.
the time were like 10 and 13. And they're looking at it and they see the rotary dial and they kept poking their fingers in the holes
Oh,
and
that's
saying,
funny.
well, how did you,
Broken.
I don't feel anything happening. And then we showed them how you actually had to dial, and they were like, that takes so long. They just couldn't believe it. So
Yeah.
I love that
Well,
stuff.
that and the funny thing is too with the technology, no one remembers numbers anymore. I mean, it's in your phone. I don't know if we could ever get away with that in the olden days. I just don't.
No, and I think that's why they get called the olden days, because we're kind
Yeah,
of
it's
done with
true.
them. We've left them
Yeah,
behind. In
yeah,
fact, a friend of mine is, speaking of the metaverse, a friend of mine who follows the retail industry has been warning all of her CIO clients and friends that if they don't have a storefront there right now, that they better get a move on, because actually, and I thought with a metaverse, it could continually expand and that you wouldn't run out of storefronts, but apparently you can. So
yeah. I would have just thought he just expanded out too and it's
I would
gross,
have
but
thought so
I mean,
too.
yeah,
All right.
that was
Last
legit.
one on my list, decentralized digital identity. And this is the idea that it's the privacy advocates are building algorithms that will help us reveal just the information we want to know. And then there are on the other side of this are the clever algorithms that advertisers are using to track us doing everything and everywhere. Do you see, is it hype or is it likely to be happening that we'll have a way to control digital, an easy, I guess, way, decentralized digital identities?
I think it has already happened.
Okay.
There's a lot of if you have a social media account, you're
Mm-hmm.
already in. So I think the
Okay.
identity is already being started. It's now what I like about how to almost disallow that behavior and content. I
Yeah.
think that needs to form, and it will. I think there's always, like, when something happens, there's a counteraction of something
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
counters it. And particularly in some of the regions, different countries where you have to be forgotten. It's
Yes.
part of the rule.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of cool capabilities that are out there to help identify and know you a little bit better. And those are all good. They really are good use cases.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
just how far do you go and become
Yeah.
creepy of knowing you too much, right?
I know. Yeah. There's that cool versus creepy line, and that
Yeah,
keeps moving a little bit.
I know.
I find it just way too fiddly. I mean, you can go into
Yeah.
Facebook and spend your time changing all your privacy settings, and then the next time they upgrade it, they all revert back. So,
Yeah,
it just seems like a lot of work.
I
So,
know. I agree with you.
yeah. All right. As we wrap up here, I want you to talk. The last question I have for you
Sure.
is how you feel your
Hmm.
own leadership style has changed or expanded or adapted in the last few years, as we've all been through, the horrors and the silver linings and the horrors of the pandemic. How is the Cisco Sanchez CIO today different in his leadership style?
I think a few things. So probably the first thing is in this role, even in the previous role, but this one primarily because I am the global CIO at Qualcomm.
Yeah.
Words matter. What you say and how you say it super matter, right? And
Mhm.
and it's because you're the guy in charge. There's a lot of, well, that's what he said, and maybe that's not what I meant, right? And so words
Yeah.
matter. So I'm very conscientious of making sure that how I say things and why I say things are
Mhm.
they're taken the right way. The second thing is I'm trying to make sure that it's not be conscientious of all other areas. What I mean by that is that
Mhm.
I'm new. I'm not established here. I get that.
Mhm.
And so trying to establish relationships, I have to appreciate the decisions that we made in the past. And so
Yeah.
what I'm learning is take a step back. And sometimes it's not just driving change. It's also learning about the things that have happened that were part of the change. And maybe they weren't the right timing, but don't just keep going in the direction, but understand. So there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing to understanding. And the last thing is when I look at the growth of our organization, I'm conscientious of not just me, but the 2,500 people within my organization and the 44,000 that are across the area on how do we become a better culture. And it's funny when you have a smaller team, you're working you really care about the team. For me, it's now I care about this whole company because I want us to be successful and drive things, and partnership matters. And so it's feeling and understanding what the business partners are doing, and that's transformed me. I'm not just looking at one thing; I'm looking at all of them and seeing how IT can play a significant role for their organization. But it's been fun. Every new opportunity, you learning something about yourself, and tomorrow I'll learn something new about me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it certainly has been a pleasure for us here on CIO Leadership Live to be learning about you today. Thanks so much for joining me for this show. It's been great having you here at Cisco.
Yeah, thanks, Maryfran. It's been fabulous. I appreciate it.
Well, and if you joined us late today, do not despair. You can watch the full episode later today right here on LinkedIn or on CIO.com or on our YouTube channel, CIO's YouTube channel. Leadership Live is also available as an audio podcast wherever you find your podcasts. And I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Cisco Sanchez, Senior Vice President and CIO at Qualcomm, as much as I enjoyed it, and that you'll plan to tune in for our next guest, who will be joining me on Wednesday, April 5th, and it will be CIO Don Goen of Texas Capital Bank. Thanks so much for tuning in today and joining us. And please take a moment to subscribe to CIO's channel on YouTube, where you can find all the previous, I think we're up to 102 episodes now of these conversations. And please feel free to just binge watch them over a couple of weekends. Thank you so much again, and stay well, and we'll see you here next time.